Imagine being destined for rejection even before you take your first breath. This isn't a tale of misfortune or random tragedy. It's the story of Esau, the man whom God declared he hated before he was born. A narrative that rattles our understanding of divine love and justice. Esau's life raises one of the most challenging questions in the Bible. Why would God reject someone before they even committed a single sin? And even more, how does this judgment shape our understanding of God's sovereignty and fairness? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will redefine everything you thought you knew about favor, fairness, and faith. Number 1, the context: a family divided. The story of Esau begins long before he made his first appearance in the world. It's set against the backdrop of an ancient prophecy and a family destined for conflict. Isaac, son of Abraham and heir to God's covenant promises, married Rebekah. When Rebekah struggled to conceive, Isaac prayed, and God blessed her with twins. Yet these weren't ordinary twins. From the very start, there was a struggle so intense that Rebekah sought divine wisdom to understand it. And the answer she received was unsettling. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. From this moment, a sense of inevitable fate loomed over Esau, the elder twin. When the boys were born, Esau emerged first, red and covered with hair, earning his name, which means hairy. Jacob followed, grasping Esau's heel as if he were already vying for position, reflecting his name, which means heel grabber or supplanter. Isaac loved Esau for his ruggedness, admiring his strength and skill as a hunter. Esau was the embodiment of everything Isaac valued: physical prowess, the great outdoors, and a life of action. But Jacob, the quieter twin who stayed close to the tents, was Rebekah's favorite. It's here that the seeds of division were sown, not just within the family but in the spiritual destinies of these 2 men. The prophecy over these twins, the older will serve the younger, wasn't just a prediction. It was a declaration that God's plans would favor Jacob over Esau. Yet what did Esau do to deserve such judgment even before he was born? It's a question that sends theologians down rabbit holes of debate about divine election, free will, and the very nature of God. This backdrop of divine mystery frames the unfolding drama, where human choice meets God's sovereign design, leaving us to ponder the complexities of our own destinies. Number 2, the birthright, a deal of desperation. Esau grew up to be a man of the field, a hunter whose exploits provided food and pride to his aging father, Isaac. Jacob, however, was the quiet shepherd, skilled in cunning and strategy rather than brute strength. The fateful day came when Esau, exhausted from a hunt, returned home famished. Jacob, cooking a pot of stew, saw an opportunity to manipulate his impulsive brother. He offered a simple meal in exchange for Esau's birthright, the inheritance that not only meant a double portion of wealth, but also the spiritual leadership over the family. To us, this might sound like a deal no one in their right mind would accept, but in a moment of weakness, Esau's hunger spoke louder than his birthright. His very words, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" exposed his short-sighted nature. The Bible doesn't paint Esau's decision as mere desperation, but rather as a profound undervaluing of God's promises. Hebrews 12:16 describes him as godless for this act, a man who put the immediate satisfaction of his stomach over an eternal blessing. Yet some argue in Esau's defense, he was, after all, hungry, perhaps even to the brink of collapse. Was it fair for Jacob to exploit his vulnerability? And even more, was it fair for such a careless mistake to shape Esau's destiny forever? Here we are forced to wrestle with the complexity of divine justice. If Esau is a tragic figure, Jacob too doesn't emerge as a hero of virtue. His manipulation feels less like divine favor and more like human cunning. But God's purposes, mysterious as they are, often work through flawed people. We see a sobering lesson. Our impulsive decisions can echo through eternity, but God's sovereignty ultimately unfolds in ways we may never fully comprehend. Number 3, the blessing stolen, betrayal by blood. If Esau's loss of the birthright was a moment of weakness, the next betrayal was nothing short of a conspiracy. As Isaac grew old and his eyesight failed, he sought to give his patriarchal blessing, another significant spiritual inheritance, to Esau. The blessing wasn't just words of affirmation, it was a prophetic declaration that would shape the future of nations. Rebekah, favoring Jacob, devised a plan to deceive her husband. While Esau hunted game to prepare a meal for his father, Jacob, disguised with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairy arms, entered Isaac's tent. Imagine the tension of that moment. Jacob, lying to his father, taking advantage of Isaac's blindness. Isaac, suspicious yet convinced, blessed Jacob instead, declaring that nations would serve him and that he would be master over his brother. When Esau returned, ready to receive his blessing, he was met with a crushing reality. His grief and rage were palpable as he wept, "Bless me, me too, my father." But Isaac had no blessing left to give, only a prophecy of a hard life and eventual rebellion against Jacob's dominion. Esau's cry isn't just the cry of a man robbed of his inheritance. It's the cry of humanity's longing for fairness. Here was a man betrayed not by strangers, but by his own family. Was he a victim of divine destiny, or were these events shaped by human deceit and manipulation? And yet the narrative seems to emphasize that Esau's loss wasn't entirely undeserved. His life choices, including marrying Hittite women who caused grief to his parents, compounded his disfavor. It's a story that leaves us questioning the balance between fate and free will, justice and mercy. Number 4, the divine hatred, wrestling with God's judgment. Perhaps the most perplexing aspect of Esau's story is God's declaration in Malachi 1:2-3. "Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated." Why such strong language? The Apostle Paul addresses this in Romans 9:13-15, explaining that God's choices don't operate by human standards of fairness. It's a doctrine that both comforts and disturbs. Comforts, because God's grace isn't something we can earn, and disturbs, because His judgment is beyond our understanding. Some theologians argue that hate in this context doesn't imply emotional loathing, but rather a divine rejection of Esau's lineage for the role of covenant blessing. It's a rejection tied to God's sovereign plan, not a personal vendetta. Yet, even with this explanation, we wrestle with the implications. Does God choose some for honor and others for dishonor before they have a say in the matter? And if so, where does human responsibility come in? The story of Esau brings us face to face with the mystery of God's will, where human understanding meets divine sovereignty. Even more, Esau's life is often seen as a warning. He becomes a symbol of those who prioritize worldly desires over spiritual blessings. The allure of immediate satisfaction, whether it's a bowl of stew or the temptations of modern life, can lead us away from what truly matters. Are we, like Esau, willing to trade our eternal inheritance for something that fills us only for a moment? It's a question that haunts and humbles. Yet, in contemplating Esau's story, we're also reminded of our need for grace. A grace that redeems our worst failures and offers hope despite our past mistakes. Number 5, the legacy of Esau, lessons and reflections. Esau's story doesn't end with bitterness and betrayal. In one of the Bible's most touching moments of reconciliation, Esau and Jacob meet years later. Jacob, fearing Esau's wrath, prepares gifts and strategies for peace. But instead of revenge, Esau embraces his brother, a gesture of forgiveness that feels almost redemptive. Yet this act of reconciliation doesn't change their destinies. Esau became the forefather of the Edomites, a nation that would clash with Israel for generations. Esau's legacy serves as both a warning and a lesson. His life reminds us of the gravity of our choices and the ripple effects they have on future generations. It also confronts us with the reality that some opportunities once lost, cannot be regained. The spiritual blessings and responsibilities we inherit are not to be taken lightly. But even in his rejection, Esau's story carries a note of hope, an invitation to recognize our spiritual inheritance and guard it with reverence. Number 6. Modern reflections. What Esau teaches us today. Esau's narrative is more than an ancient tale. It's a mirror reflecting our struggles with priorities, identity, and purpose. In today's fast-paced, gratification-driven world, how often do we trade what's eternal for what's immediate? Esau is a reminder that spiritual wealth outweighs material gains, that our souls long for something deeper than the next momentary thrill. Moreover, his story challenges our understanding of God's grace and justice. Why some are chosen and others seemingly passed over remains a mystery. Yet the Apostle Paul assures us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for the good of those who love God. Even the hardest truths, like Esau's rejection, find their place in God's redemptive story. And perhaps in grappling with these truths, we find a deeper, more humble faith. A faith that trusts God's wisdom beyond human understanding. Esau's life compels us to ask, are we living with an awareness of our spiritual inheritance? Are we making choices that honor God's eternal promises? Or are we driven by the desires of the moment? As we ponder these questions, the Bible assures us that our story, like Esau's, has purpose, even if it's a hard one to understand. Esau's story is a call to treasure what God has given us, to think beyond the temporary and reach for the eternal. It's a story that asks us to reflect. Are we living for the moment or for something greater? Now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about Esau's choices and God's judgment? Does his story resonate with your own struggles between the temporary and the eternal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this exploration eye-opening, hit that subscribe button and join our community where we dig deeper into the most challenging stories of the Bible. Until next time, hold on to what truly matters.